B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. All that tough talk and bluster, pandering to the base by the Trump team is giving way to reality. And we see fumbles on the attempt to repeal Obamacare and on key foreign policy issues. This podcast is available daily on YouTube, and since tomorrow's Friday, I'll be doing my second Facebook Live video feed as I record this podcast at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Look for me on Facebook at Peter B. Collins or Peter B. Collins Show. I'm still working out some of the technical details to make it all happen. Well, it's fascinating to see. Less than 2 weeks into the Trump administration, a key senator has signaled that the effort to repeal and replace Obamacare will shift to an effort to repair Obamacare. Now, we don't know exactly what repair means from a Republican perspective, but this is a very dramatic shift. And it signals that there is dissension in the Republican ranks, and they know they've got the votes to repeal it. But then they're stuck with what comes next. And they know that Democrats will not go along with these market-based supply-side efforts to rejigger our health care system. And so Lamar Alexander, the guy who favors plaid shirts, a somewhat moderate or formerly moderate Republican from Tennessee who chairs the Senate Health Committee, said, well, let's talk about repair. We can repair the individual market, and that is a good place to start. Now, I think this is a white flag of surrender. Trump, of course, will never admit that. And they may have some symbolic votes that, give a sense, a resolution, a non-binding, statement that Obamacare sucks. And as you know, I've been test driving Obamacare since it debuted, and it does suck in some ways, but not the ways the Republicans say. And so this could be, I think, a signal of a sea change. I could be wrong about this, but I believe that it is the big donors and the corporate insurance executives who got to Trump and the Republican leadership. And they said, look, you guys are going to blow up Obamacare, and when you do it, you're going to blow up the insurance markets. Because one of the big defects that I've always argued about Obamacare is it shoved millions of new health insurance customers into the arms of the for-profit insurance industry. And that, which I see as a defect of Obamacare, is actually one of the reasons why the Republicans have to be careful about the moves they make. And even the head of Anthem Blue Cross, or Anthem, they're called Anthem Blue Cross in California, and boy, were they lousy when I tried out their coverage in the first year of Obamacare. But Joe Swedish, chief executive of Anthem, says, while the direction in Washington has been positive, we still need certainty about short-term fixes in order to determine the extent of our participation. So that is a veiled threat in very polite executive sweet language. And so I think that this is going to be something we need to watch. But if they try to fix Obamacare, they try to repair it instead of repeal it, what will we get? They hate the individual mandate, which, of course, was a Republican idea that Obama put in there to try to get Republican votes. And the individual mandate is necessary to make the pool of insured people big enough so that we're not only selling insurance to sick people, that skews the costs. Also, the pre-existing conditions issue, there's a dollar figure attached to that. You blow it up, well, it means that some people can't get insurance or that they have to pay even higher rates to get coverage. So I am pleased to see so soon these cracks develop in the Republican approach to the health care system. And I know I'm just talking to myself when I say this, but the real answer is single payer. It's right there under the noses of the Republicans. And if they were to expand Medicare by 5-year increments each year to cover new people, it would lower the age of the Medicare pool. It would, sustain Medicare for a longer time than it's currently projected for. But, of course, Republicans can't even imagine that because it's seen as a government program, one of the most cost-effective and efficient ones that we have ever seen. Then we turn to military and foreign policy. Last weekend, Trump signed off on his first foreign operation. And, of course, a lot of this was paved by Obama, who was able to bomb in Yemen with drone strikes, insert commandos for raids, and use Yemen as a shooting gallery for many years. And that standard, if you can call it that, lowered the bar. And so at a dinner last week, Trump gathered with the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Mad Dog Mattis, the new Secretary of Defense, and, of course, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his brain, Stephen Bannon, were there. And Trump approved sending in Navy SEAL Team 6, hoping that the raid early Sunday would grab cell phones and laptop computers that would yield valuable intelligence. And in an article today, and let me first say that the New York Times at moments is very aggressive on Trump, and at other times is less so. But the website headline on this article that I'm looking at is entitled, "What Went Wrong in Navy SEALs Raid, Nearly Everything." Now, when I printed it out, the headline shifted to "Raid in Yemen, Risky from the Start and Costly in the End." Now, we know that women and children were killed. The Pentagon is trying to say that those women had grabbed guns and they appeared to have been trained in how to respond to this Navy SEAL assault. But we also learned that the raid was botched in many ways, and the Times is too polite to use that term. But the assault force of several dozen commandos, which included elite soldiers from the United Arab Emirates, was jinxed from the start. Al-Qaeda fighters were somehow tipped off to the advance toward the village that was targeted, perhaps by the sound of American drones that were hovering overhead. And through a communications intercept, our team, the commandos, knew that the mission had been compromised, but they went ahead anyway. And they took up positions and saw that defenders were in houses, a clinic, a school, and a mosque, and it involved some women and children, according to the U.S. accounts. Then some of the women grabbed weapons, started firing. Again, this is based on the U.S. account, multiplying the militant firepower beyond what they had expected. So the Americans called in airstrikes from helicopter gunships, and they also landed 2 of these Osprey hovercraft. One of them, worth $75 million, was badly damaged and had to be left behind, later destroyed by an airstrike. So the target was the village of Yakla, which we're learning was largely destroyed and pissed off the Yemenis quite a bit. So let's turn now to an account from The Guardian, the London-based newspaper, that uses the headline, "Questions Mount Over Botched Yemen Raid Approved by Trump." And the term botched is quite appropriate here. I just gave you some descriptions of what went wrong. And The Guardian quotes unnamed U.S. military officials, yes, the anonymous official leak, telling Reuters that Trump approved his first covert counterterrorism operation without sufficient intelligence, ground support, or adequate backup preparations. And we also know, as I have reported earlier this week, that this botched raid killed a 3rd member of the Alaki family. And it's hard to argue that an 8-year-old girl has any terrorist connections or was able to pick up a weapon in defense of this location as the U.S. and its allied team attacked. And CENTCOM is saying, well, a team designated by the Operational Task Force commander has concluded that civilian non-combatants likely were killed in the midst of a firefight on that raid, and that the casualties may include children. But it's only media accounts that have named the 8-year-old Alaki girl. So the Trump administration is furiously spinning this, trying to deny that they did anything wrong or that they weren't prepared. But there's a whole pattern here of shoot first and ask questions later. And they shot first with the travel ban. They've had to modify it, and they quietly have done that, as we reported yesterday. And the latest aggravation is compounded by the work of the spinmeister in the press office at the White House, Sean Spicer, because today, at a press briefing, he asserted, and this is flatly false, that Iran had attacked a U.S. naval vessel. He went on to say that the National Security Advisor was putting Iran on notice because, and this is the actual fact, of an attack on a Saudi naval vessel by Houthi rebels in Yemen. And the Houthis or Houthis are the people who are aligned with Iran, but there is no direct connection. We have heard that Iran has been supplying them, but we haven't seen proof. And a lot of this is an effort to try to falsely link Iran to the situation in Yemen for further adventurism by the United States. So Spicer claimed that Iran's government took actions against a U.S. naval vessel. Quote, I think General Flynn was really clear yesterday that Iran has violated the joint resolution, that Iran's additional hostile actions that it took against our Navy vessel are ones that were very clear we're not going to sit by and take. I think we will have further updates for you on those additional actions. And then a reporter said, it was a Saudi vessel. And Spicer inaudibly said, sorry, thank you, yes, a Saudi vessel. Yes, that's right. So the amateurism of the Trump team that we are seeing play out can have deadly consequences. And it appears they're itching for some provocation that would justify an attack on Iran. The neocons have been wishing for this for a long time. The state of Israel has been demanding it for a long time. And it appears that Mike Flynn and Donald Trump may be looking for that provocation. So I'm linking in the show file for today's podcast to a blogger named Tony Cartolucci, and he publishes on his own blog called Land Destroyer Report. And I want to thank Joe Lauria, who's a veteran journalist who covers the UN, for sharing this article with me. And what you'll find here is a very critical look at these military moves, and Cartolucci says that he's very concerned that the Trump team may be pushing for a new conflict. And he said that General Flynn's statement, which was, instead of being thankful to the United States for the nuclear agreements, Iran is now feeling emboldened. As of today, we're officially putting Iran on notice. Well, Cartolucci describes that as particularly surreal, considering that Yemeni fighters are only targeting Saudi warships because Saudi Arabia is currently waging a full-scale war on Yemen, with war crimes accusations on all sides. And he says Flynn still claims that the attack on Saudi Arabia's warship constitutes justification for putting Iran on notice, claiming that Iran is sponsoring terrorism throughout the region when it is currently a major member of the coalition fighting the Salafist principality, that is, the Islamic State, in both Iraq and Syria, is also surreal, he points out. So these are very dangerous times, and we have reckless, belligerent, arrogant bullies in our administration who may cause a serious conflict. President Trump has also been found to be pretty intemperate in a recent phone call that occurred last weekend with the Prime Minister of Australia, whose name is Malcolm Turnbull. And in that conversation, the Aussie reminded Mr. Trump that the U.S. has agreed to accept 1,250 refugees from an Australian detention center. These people are held on the Pacific islands of Nauru and Manus. They are mostly from Iran and Iraq. Some have been there for as long as 3 years, as they are barred from entering the nation of Australia. And the deal that was arranged with the Obama administration was that these, at least 1,250 of them, would be accepted by the United States. But Trump got angry with Turnbull, apparently ended the call abruptly. We don't know if he actually hung up on him. And after this was revealed, Trump tweeted, Do you believe it? The Obama administration agreed to take thousands of illegal immigrants from Australia. Why? I will study this dumb deal. Now, it clearly was embarrassing to Trump to be confronted with this on the weekend that he had pulled up the drawbridges on Fortress America and announced his misguided and irrational travel ban. Turnbull, we're getting leaks about this phone call, and Turnbull has not been publicly willing to confirm what was said. But a senior Trump administration official said that Trump told Turnbull that the refugees could include the next Boston bombers. That's pretty hysterical. So we will see how this plays out, but it's just another case of Trump acting in an arrogant and bullying manner. And at some point, that's going to come back to bite him. So a recent poll shows that there is a strong divide among Americans about the announced travel ban and other immigration moves by Trump. 48% said they agreed with the executive order, 41% disagreed. So there is no majority position, but there is a strong nativist element in this country who tell pollsters, yeah, keep those people out. And, of course, it is just very un-American. And as I point out, it doesn't make us any safer. It just panders to the conservative right in this country. There's a thoughtful piece in the New York Times today, headlined, Trump pushes dark view of Islam to center of U.S. policymaking. And as the headline suggests, it talks in the opening paragraphs in a kind of neutral way about how the Trump team embraces this very, very negative view of all Muslims. And later in the article, they start to talk about who has influenced Trump's thinking. So it includes Sebastian Gorka, who taught at the National Defense University, who's now a deputy national security advisor. His wife, who headed think tanks and focused on the dangers of Islam, now works at Homeland Security. Tira Dahl, who was an aide to Michelle Bachmann, the wacky congresswoman who ran for president from Minnesota. She's on the National Security Council. Walid Faras, a Lebanese-American Christian who's advised politicians on counterterrorism, is not currently in the government, but all of these people have written for Breitbart News, and they have strong support from Steve Bannon. And the Times, quote, they all reflect the hardline opinions of what some have described as the Islamophobia industry, a network of researchers who have warned for many years on the dangers of Islam and were thrilled by Trump's election. So this is clear linkage to the most extreme and unhinged elements of the American politic. And I think it's pretty clear. Every day I like to stop for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And today, let's see who's on the list here. Jeffrey Stewart. Oh, Jeff just canceled. I'm going to miss you, Jeff, but thanks for your support in the past. Alice Carlson, Linda Gray, Craig Baylog, Steve Wozensky. Those are just a few of the people who are regular subscribers here, and I invite you to join them. I need your help to keep this whole project going and to fund it. So come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click on the sign up, click on menu, pull it down, click on become a subscriber. That takes you to the sign up page. And in minutes with PayPal, or if you don't like PayPal, you can make a direct payment in cash or a check to the address that is listed on the page there. It's Box 100, Mill Valley, California, 94942. I have listeners and subscribers all around the nation and around the globe. And one whom I won't name today because of the situation where he lives. He checked in from Saudi Arabia a couple of days ago. And he said, Peter, I'm sure you're inundated with stories about the effects of Trump's actions. Just wanted to tell you that Saudis are very afraid and freaked out. They're not speaking out publicly because open political expression can get you in trouble. But when you talk to them personally, they are terrified. And the vast majority will not be traveling to the U.S. from now on, if my Saudi friends and acquaintances here are any indication. I also have friends with Crohn's disease. They tell me there's a lot of fear out there in their community over changes in healthcare policy and fearing that they'll lose access to the drugs they need. I've been telling my Muslim friends and family just to wait and see. Maybe a Trump presidency won't be so bad. Well, that turns out to have been terribly naive. I think it's clear to see at this point. I try to listen to media that support Trump just to try to understand what's happening and how they're thinking. And they're very into this idea that there's an evil statist globalist cabal. And our hope, our last hope, is Donald Trump. They seem blind to any negatives regarding Trump's policies. And, you know, it kind of reminds me of 1930s Germany. The Jew has been replaced with the cabal. Well, thank you for your comments from Saudi Arabia today. Well, in order to get Trump's cabinet officers, the most controversial ones, confirmed, the Republican-controlled Senate is breaking the rules or changing the rules, depending on who you believe. And those rules amount to a way to avoid the efforts by Democrats to deny a quorum in committees considering these appointees. And so we've seen that when Democrats boycotted the Finance Committee, Orrin Hatch, the idiot from Utah, just basically changed the rules, and he acknowledged that his move was unprecedented. But they simply ignored the Democrats and voted out the nominees with only Republican votes. Now, the Republicans had the majority, and the Democrats, without a defector from the Republican side, couldn't hope to stop any of these confirmations. But the Republicans seemed to be so desperate that they couldn't even wait a day or two and let the Democrats let off a little steam. And so we have a whole system now that is being modified or mangled in order to produce the outcome desired by the majority. And they are ruthless in pursuing it. So they did that yesterday in order to vote out the nomination of Scott Pruitt to head the EPA. 11-0 was the committee vote, and so he will not be legitimate in my eyes. But he probably will be confirmed. They used the same tactic to get Tom Price of Georgia out of committee to run Health and Human Services, and Stephen Mnuchin to head the Treasury Department. So these three people did not get a vote by both parties in the committee hearings. And so this leads to speculation about what, for example, Scott Pruitt will do. The Attorney General from Oklahoma, who had sued the EPA that he's now going to run 14 times. And Myron Abell, who is this moron from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Trump made him the lead of the transition team related to the EPA. He is a paid climate denier. And Myron Abell told The Guardian that he aspires to have Scott Pruitt abolish the EPA or at least slim it down dramatically. Now, he notes that to abolish an agency requires not only thought but time, because you have to decide what to do with certain functions that Congress has assigned to that agency. But it was Trump's goal during the campaign to abolish the EPA, and it is a goal he has, and sometimes it takes a long time to achieve them. So that's what their real agenda is. And yesterday there were hearings on Capitol Hill by the House Oversight and Government Reform, a subcommittee, and Democrats demanded evidence be preserved related to the gag orders that were distributed to cabinet agencies right after Trump was sworn in, and that gagged them from contacting the public, elected officials, and others. And so that track is underway. And separately, an inspector general has demanded that all documents be retained related to Trump's executive order on the travel ban that was issued late last Friday night. So this is encouraging that at least there will be a record of some of the bizarre early moves of the Trump administration. Last night, just across the bay from me at the University of California, Berkeley campus, there was a scheduled event where a Breitbart editor named Milo Yiannopoulos, who is a gay man who is out there on a provocative effort to stir up controversy, he is conducting what he calls his dangerous faggot speaking tour. And he is a very insulting, devious kind of guy, I put it that way. And unfortunately, the peaceful protesters who assembled to simply protest his appearance there without attempting to stop it were overwhelmed by a small group of black bloc hooded activists who came in and fired off firecrackers. They rammed the building with barricades, they broke windows, and generally tried to instill fear in the conservatives who had gathered to hear Yiannopoulos. And while I deplore what he has to say, I believe in the First Amendment for me and for Milo Yiannopoulos. And I really deplore that people saw it as a victory, that like they did a few weeks ago at the University of California, Davis, that the violent activists succeeded in preventing the speech from taking place. And I think that this is something we don't want to promote. I know there are some people who think that it's good to shut down somebody they think is a Nazi or a hate speaker. But the First Amendment is blind as to the type of speech and the the despicable nature of it. And I, unfortunately, oppose these activists and support the First Amendment right of Yiannopoulos. And Barbara Lee, the congresswoman from Oakland and the East Bay, condemned the reaction of Donald Trump, who tweeted out a statement that, what did it say? If UC Berkeley doesn't allow free speech and practices violence on innocent people with a different point of view, no federal funds, ? So that's a threat from the bully. And to be fair, the university didn't practice violence. I thought the officials were pretty restrained. At one point, they threatened to use tear gas and batons and clear the area of protesters, and they stood down on that threat. And we've seen the black bloc people before, and I don't support the methods that they use. They simply don't advance our interests. Activists were arrested, some 76, near Standing Rock, North Dakota yesterday, and I'm getting mixed reports because it appears that the leader of the Standing Rock group, the chairman Dave Archambault, he actually supported the removal of the people from this relatively new camp that was set up recently by a group described as rogue protesters. And Linda Black Elk of the Catawba Nation, who supports this new encampment, said, we started to see police mobilizing from all directions. Someone came along, told us we had about 15 minutes before the camp would be raided, and so it was, in fact, raided. And Archambault said that, look, the action here has moved from the ground to the courts. He says the struggle is no longer being waged on the ground, but instead in federal court. And the Standing Rock tribe voted to ask the protesters to leave the main camp back in mid-January. And those who plan to occupy the new camp, says the chairman, are putting all of our work at risk. So from here, it's hard for me to determine. I tend to defer to Archambault here, and that, just creating a confrontation out there on the Great Plain may not have much impact where the court actions more likely will. In Israel, on the West Bank, well, not in Israel, on the occupied West Bank, illegal settlers in the area called Amona were routed and removed by soldiers and police officers. And this evacuation, which follows years of legal battles, is finally coming to a head. Now, I support their evacuation. Unfortunately, it is overwhelmed by the plans for new illegal settlements that have been hatched by the Netanyahu government. Also across the bay from me in Oakland, in a courtroom yesterday, federal prosecutors revealed why they are pursuing charges against the widow of the man accused of shooting up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Noor Salman is the survivor here, and according to the government file, she did collude with her husband, whose name is Omar Mateen, and aided and abetted him. The government case says that she helped him case out joints. She agreed with him that the Pulse nightclub was better than other targets that they had considered. They made moves expecting that he would die or go to prison because they changed a bank account so she could get the money from it. And he also bought her an $8,000 diamond ring. They burned through $30,000 in the 10 days leading up to the attack. Now, this is all the government's case. But we also learned from her defense attorneys that she is considered to have diminished mental capacity, that she was a battered wife, and it is very unclear if the interrogation of this woman was conducted properly. They said she was picked up at 4 a.m. after the attack, questioned for the next 18 hours. The interview started in a police car and ended in an FBI office in a file room, but there's no indication that she had a lawyer present for any of those interrogations. I'm pleased to see that the City and County of San Francisco has announced that it's ending its collaboration with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. The 10-year agreement is expiring, and the San Francisco government has decided not to extend it. And I fully support this. They never should have gotten in bed with the feds to begin with, but because of the issues related to Sanctuary City that are looming large, I think that San Francisco has made the right decision, and I'd like to see other cities make a similar move. So when I first heard about this, Donald Trump at a national prayer breakfast starts talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, the lousy ratings of The Apprentice, and asking the group to pray for better ratings for Schwarzenegger and the show. Now, it's actually not quite as unhinged as you get at first blush, because at this prayer breakfast, Trump was introduced by Mark Burnett, who is, I think he's a British guy. He helped develop the Apprentice concept, and he introduced Trump. And so Trump took that as, I guess, a trigger to talk about himself and about the TV show that made him infamous. And beneath this ridiculous exchange, and by the way, Schwarzenegger responded, "Hey, Donald, I have a great idea. Why don't we switch jobs? You take the TV show because you're such an expert in ratings, and I take over your job. Then people can finally sleep comfortably again." So this pissing match between Schwarzenegger and Trump is really silly, and it's insulting, I think, to the religious people who gathered for this breakfast. But what is obscured by this little comic interlude is that Trump told the people assembled at this prayer breakfast that he is going to totally destroy the Johnson Amendment, named for Lyndon Johnson, who was a senator in the 1950s when it was passed. And it requires, actually what it says is that churches are not allowed to openly endorse or campaign for political candidates, and if they do, they risk losing the benefits of their tax-exempt status. And so Trump wants to free religions, and this, of course, is mostly Christian evangelical religions in his book, to participate fully in politics. And this is a dangerous move to undermine the separation of church and state that is enumerated in the First Amendment. And that, friends, is another slice of Trump's America. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.